Marjorie Ockley turned the page with her thumb and went on reading, because the old man beside her had not moved, and she had learned by now that when Mr. Latimer did not move, he was listening hardest. They sat on the third bench of the lime walk, as they had sat every Tuesday since October, with the shorn green of Corvidale Park running away on their left and the limes in flower over their heads, so that the whole avenue hummed above them like a held note. He paid her a shilling for the hour. That shilling was a quarter of everything she had to live on, and Michaelmas would want 30 shillings of her for the room over the staymaker's shop in the town, and she had a little better than a third of it in a tin, and nothing else promised. 8 weeks. After Michaelmas there was the road, and she knew exactly what the road was, having been on it once already. In the spring her father died, so she read, and she read well, because a woman who reads well is worth a shilling, and a woman who reads badly is worth nothing at all. "Go back," said Mr. Latimer. "The part about the ship. You had it twice. I shall have it a third time. It is my newspaper." She went back and gave him the ship again. His hands lay one on the other on the head of his stick, and his face was turned up under the limes at nothing. And the bees went over in a steady traffic, and somewhere down the walk a child was being told to stop running. There was a man standing where the avenue bent, at the far end, with his hat in his hand. He had been standing there a good while. She had noticed him at the second column of the paper, and he had not moved through the third, and men who wait for a walk to clear do not wait that long. He was tall, and he was hatless in the sun, and he was too far off for his face, and he had the stillness of somebody who has come to hear a thing and does not want to be seen hearing it. "Is there somebody?" said Mr. Latimer. "A gentleman down the end," she said. "Waiting on the walkers to thin out, I should think." "Then read louder," said the old man, and let him wait. It had begun in October, on a Friday, with rain coming. Her father had kept bees on 9 acres of rented ground above the water meadows, and he had kept them better than anybody in that parish. And when he died in April, the ground went back to the man who owned it, and the stocks were sold at the door in one morning. Straw hive after straw hive carried off down the lane by men who did not know how to hold them. She had watched from the step. Then she had walked into the county town with a box and a shawl, and had found the room over the staymakers, and had kept herself since on plain sewing, and on the fact that she could read anything put in front of her, which not 1 woman in 5 in that town could do. She read for a grocer's wife on Thursdays. She wrote letters at the market cross for a penny, and did not always take the penny. On that Friday in October, there had been an old man on the third bench of the lime walk, with a newspaper folded in his pocket, stopping people. He had a good coat on him, and a voice that had been used to being obeyed, and he was saying to whoever was passing whether they would oblige him by reading a little, and they were saying they were sorry, they were in a hurry, and going by. She stood and watched 3 of them go by. Then she sat down on the bench and said, "Give it here, then I can pay," he said, very fast. "I know. A shilling." "That is too much for 1 hour of my time," said Marjorie, "but I shall take it, because you have plainly made up your mind to be robbed by somebody today." He laughed, which she had not expected, and it turned into a cough, which she had. She read him the paper end to end, the shipping and the assizes and the price of wheat, and a letter from a gentleman who was very angry about a bridge. When she had done, he sat quiet a while and then said he supposed she would come Tuesday. "I will come Tuesday," she said. "But you had better hear my terms." "Terms," he said, "from a woman on a bench." "I will read you what is there. I will not put anything in, and I will not leave anything out. If there is something you would rather not hear, you tell me before I begin, and I will pass it over. But once I have started, I read it all." Mr. Latimer thought about that for longer than she thought it deserved. "Nobody has read me anything straight in 11 years, he said at last. "They read me the parts they think will not upset me. My own eyes went, and everybody else's manners went with them." He put out his hand for the paper and missed it, and she put it into his hand. "Yes, read it all." In November there was a letter in among his post. He carried his letters loose in his coat and brought them out in a heap, and she went through them and told him what each was, and read the ones he wanted. That morning there were 3, and the third was directed in a small, upright hand, and had a seal on the back that she knew, because it was the same seal that stood in the ironwork over the park gates at the town end, where she came in every Tuesday of her life. The week before, 2 women on the next bench had said the name Corverdale to each other, only in passing, only as people say the name of a great house. She had watched Mr. Latimer get up in the middle of a sentence and go home. He had not come the following Tuesday, and when he came the one after, that he had been ill and did not say so. She looked at the seal, and she looked at him sitting there with his face up into the thin November sun, and she put the letter into her pocket. "The paper, then," she said. "Anything else?" "No," said Marjorie, "nothing else." She did it again in December. She did it again in February, and again in March, and by June there were 4 letters in a tin under her bed in the room over the staymakers, and she had never told one living soul. The sound over the lime walk changed. Marjorie heard it before anything else did. The hum that had been going on above them all morning, even and unbothered, took on a note underneath it, lower and rougher, and then the air at the top of the walled garden wall began to be full of something. She stopped in the middle of a sentence about the assizes. "What is it?" said Mr. Latimer. "Bees," said Marjorie, and stood up. They came over the wall in a column and spread, and the whole sky above the third bench went granular, and the noise of it filled the avenue from end to end. Down the walk somebody screamed, and there was a general running for the gates, and a woman went by with her bonnet in her hands over her head, and a man was shouting at everybody to get down, which is exactly the wrong advice. Marjorie put the newspaper into Mr. Latimer's hands. "Sit where you are," she said. "Hands still. They are not interested in you. Where are you going?" Under them. They were making for a lime bow 40 yards on, and by the time she got there, they had begun to gather, hanging down off the branch in a shape like a drawn-out pear, still boiling at the edges and going quieter in the middle. She stood underneath and looked up into it and let them land on her. There was a man with a ladder coming across the grass at a run. "Leave them be," he shouted. "Miss, leave them be." "I want a straw hive," said Marjorie, without turning round. "A skep. There will be old ones in the wax house. Bring me a clean one and a sheet and set that ladder here." The man stopped. He was old and thick through the chest, and had a keeper's coat on, and grass seed all down him, and he looked at her the way men look at a horse that has just done something they did not know horses did. "Hobgarrow," he said, as if she had asked. "There's 100 skeps in the wax house, and every one of them rotten." "Then bring me the least rotten." and do it before they take up again, because if they take up again, they will go to the woods, and that is a swarm of somebody's bees gone for good, and it is the beginning of June, which means that swarm is worth more than the bench I have been sitting on." Garrow went. He came back with a skep and a sheet and a boy who would not come closer than the next tree. She spread the sheet on the ground and set the skep upside down on it, propped up at one edge on a stone so there was a way in. Then she went up the ladder with the skep in one arm, put it under the cluster, and hit the both once, sharply, downward, with the flat of her hand. The whole weight of them dropped into the straw at once, with a sound like a shovelful of gravel. She came down the ladder holding the skep level and turned it over onto the sheet in one movement and stood back. "Now we wait," she said. "For what?" said Garrow. "For the mouth." The stragglers came off the bough in ones and twos and went down to the sheet and ran up under the edge of the skep. In a minute or two there were bees standing along the rim with their tails in the air and their wings going, holding themselves down hard against the straw. "There," said Marjorie. "See them stand up and fan. They are calling the rest in, and they only do that when the queen is inside. If she had missed, we should know it in 5 minutes, because the whole thing would come up off the sheet and go back to the bough, and then we should have to do it again with the light going." Garrow looked at the fanning bees for some time. "My father did bees," he said. "Most people's fathers did bees. He never told me that. He would not have known he knew it," said Marjorie. "That is how it is with the good ones. They do it and they cannot say it." The man from the end of the walk had come up while she was on the ladder and had stopped about 10 feet off, and he had not run, and he had not shouted, and he had put his hat back on. "Garrow," he said. "Whose swarm is that?" "Yours, your grace," said Garrow. "Off the bank. 3rd or 4th this month gone over the wall, and none of them stopped. And this is the first one anybody has stopped." "That's the size of it." The Duke of Corverdale looked at Marjorie Ockley for a while, and she looked back at him, because she had never in her life been able to see the profit in looking at the ground. "You read to my father," he said. "I do. Every Tuesday since October." "That is right." "He has never once mentioned it," said the Duke, "because he has not spoken to me since the spring before last. Garrow told me. I came down to see. You have been standing there the better part of an hour." "I have." "Then you might have sat down," said Marjorie, "for he is not going to bite you, and the 3rd bench takes 3. Something happened in the man's face, and did not get all the way out. "What is wrong with my bee yard?" he said. "Everything, name it." "I have not seen it. Name what you can see from here, then." She turned and pointed at the wall of the walled garden with her chin, because both her hands were full of sheet. 3 swarms gone over that wall this month, you say, and nobody after them. That is your increase walking into the woods. Whoever has the charge of them is not looking at them between 1 September and the next, and in September I will lay you anything you like. He takes the heaviest stalks and kills them for the honey, and puts the light ones through the winter, because the heavy ones are the ones with something in them. Which is the same as saying, he eats his seed corn and sows his chaff, and then wonders at the crop. The Duke said nothing for a moment. "Reuben does the bees," said Garrow helpfully. "Then Reuben has been told to do it that way by somebody," said Marjorie. "And I will not be quarreling with Reuben about it. For a man does what he is told, or he is out of a place. And I know which of those 2 things is worse. There were 140 stalks on that bank in my grandfather's time," said the Duke of Corverdale. The wax went to half the churches in the county. My agent tells me the bank is worth nothing now, and that the ground under it will grow good early peas, and he wants it grubbed up at Michaelmas. Then your agent is a fool about bees, and may be quite right about peas. Can you make it pay by Michaelmas? No, said Marjorie. Nobody could. Bees do not go that fast. I can show you by Michaelmas whether it will pay next year, which is a different question, and the only one worth asking. And I will tell you now, before you offer me anything, so that you cannot say afterwards that I was slippery about it. What would you want? Wages, and a room, and my Tuesdays. Your Tuesdays. I read to your father on Tuesdays, said Marjorie, and I am not giving it up for you or for anybody. He has paid me $1 a week since October, and he has never once been late with it, and never once asked me to leave a hard thing out of the paper, and there is not a man in this county I think better of. The Duke of Corverdale stood in the middle of his own park, with his hands at his sides. And one condition, she said. Not a stock smothered, not one, not for any weight of honey there ever was. Done, he said. So she gave up the room over the staymakers at midsummer, and slept from then on in the little chamber over the wax house, where the whole building smelt of old comb and hot water, and where at 4 a.m. the noise of the bank coming awake came in through the shutter like rain starting. The bank ran 60 yards along the south face of the walled garden, built up in turf and faced with stone flags, with a thatched roof carried on posts the whole length of it to keep the weather off. On the flags stood the skeps, each on its own board, each with a flat stone on top, against the wind. There had been 140 of them once. Marjorie counted 19. At the end of the bank stood the wax house, with its copper and its presses and its trays of moulds, and a room beyond it where the honey was run off, and the shelves of that room were bare from one end to the other. She went along the bank the first evening with a lantern she did not light, working in the last of the daylight, and Effie from the wax house came out and stood at a safe distance to watch her. Are you not going to put anything over your face? Not for this. Come here. I would rather not. Come here, said Marjorie, and stand where I stand, and put your hand flat on the top of that one. Don't be quick about it. Bees mind quickness more than they mind people. Effie came in about the way a cat comes, and put her hand on the crown of the skep, and jumped, and left it there. It's warm. It is warm, because there are 40,000 of them in there making it warm, and that is the first thing worth knowing about them. A cold hive in June is a dead hive, and you never need open it to find out. She tipped the skep back on the edge of its board, and got her hand under the rim from behind and lifted, and set it down again. Now that one is heavy. That is honey, and it is a good deal of it. Feel the difference on this next one. Effie lifted, and nearly fell over backwards. It came straight up. It came straight up because there is nothing in it, and that is a stock that will be dead by February, unless somebody feeds it. Now put your ear to the mouth. What am I listening for? An even note, like water in a pipe, going on. That is a stock with a queen in it, and nothing to complain of. She moved 2 along, and turned the skep gently up on its rim, and looked in under it, at the combs hanging down, pale at the edges, and dark up the middle. Now this one. Listen at that. Effie listened. It's higher. It is a wail. It goes up and down, and never settles. That is a stock that has lost its queen, and if it stays like that, it will be robbed out by the end of the month, and every bee in it will die in somebody else's hive with their pockets full. How do they die with their pockets full? They go and steal, at the end, said Marjorie, when they know it is over. They go and carry off what they can from whoever will let them in. It is the saddest thing on this bank, and it happens every year. She went down the whole row like that. Under one skep the combs had a bloom of grey on them, and a smell coming off like a wet cellar, and she marked that board with a stone set on its edge. On another the board was crooked, and the whole skep sat askew, and she put her boot under it and levelled it with a wedge of slate. A skep on a rocking board is a skep they will leave, she said. They cannot fasten the comb to something that moves. There are 7 boards on this bank rocking, and I could feel every one of them from the top end. The last of the light went out of the walled garden wall behind them. They say in the house you are after him, said Effie. After who? You know who. I know who, said Marjorie. I only wanted to hear whether you would say it to my face, and you have, so we shall get on. Effie went red from the collar up. I did not mean it. You meant it enough to say it. Look here. She wiped her hands down her apron. I am 24, and I am plain, and I have got £9 a year and a room over a copper, and if I were after a duke, I should be the greatest fool that ever came in at that gate. I am after 19 skeps, and by my Kelmas I mean to have 26, and if I get that I shall be as pleased with myself as anybody in this park. That is the whole of it. Now, do you want to know how to tell whether the queen is laying, or do you want to go on standing there wishing you had not started? Effie thought about it. I want to know the other, she said, and I am sorry. Then hold the lantern and do not swing it. The estate room had a table in it, with nothing on the table. That was the thing Marjorie noticed on the first Friday, and went on noticing every Friday after at 7 o'clock, when she came up from the bank with her hands scrubbed and gave her account of the week. There were papers on the sill, and papers on the chairs, and papers in a box on the floor, and the table itself was clean as a plate. 19 stocks, she said, 2 of them queenless, and both worth saving. 4 light enough to want feeding through July, which nobody ever does, and which is why this yard has been going backwards since your grandfather died. The sugar will cost you what a joint of beef costs. Have it. 7 boards want levelling, and the flags want digging back and setting straight, and that is a man for 3 days with a spade. Have him. You had better write it down, said Marjorie, or your agent will ask me by what right. The Duke of Corvedale looked at the paper she had put on the table, and then he moved it 2 inches to the left with one finger, and left it there. Tell Garrow I said it, he said. The wound was told to her in the 2nd week of July, at the top of the bank, with the wind coming from the west, and the bees flying high. Garrow was holding the end of a length of new thatch, and Marjorie was tying it, and the Duke had come down the walled garden path and stopped, and had asked whether the new roof would carry the winter. It will carry the winter, said Garrow, and it wants doing at the lodge as well, and has done these 2 years, and you have never sent the men. Garrow, I am saying it in front of her because I have said it to you alone 4 times, and it did no good, said Garrow. The lodge roof is going, and the old gentleman sits under it. He would not have them, said the Duke. He would not have them, because you did not go down and ask him. You wrote. Marjorie went on tying and did not look at either of them. That is not a fair account, Garrow, said the Duke. Then give her a fair one, said Garrow, because she reads to him every Tuesday of her life, and she does not know why he sits in a public walk to have his own letters read to him by a stranger, and she has the right of anybody who has been kind to him for 9 months. Nobody said anything for a moment. Down the bank a stock was throwing out drones, and the grass in front of the board was moving with them. 6 years ago there was a wet summer, and a worse one after it, said the Duke of Corvedale. There are hill farms on the north of this estate. Were? My agent brought me a paper that said the ground would never carry the rents again, and that the arrears would swallow the estate if I let them run, and that the proper course was to clear it and put it down to sheep. And you signed it, said Marjorie to the thatch. I signed it. 22 families off the hill in 1 month. And I did not go up there, not once, before or after, because I had a paper that told me what was up there. He stopped. There was a man called Amos Trewin, who was 70 and had been born in the top house. He would not go until they took the door off. He went into the town, and he was dead by the spring, and I am told it was his chest, and I am told it was his age, and I have never for 1 hour believed either of them. The wind came over the wall and went along the thatch. And the ground came round, said Garrow. The ground came round, said the Duke. It let last Lady Day at a better rent than it ever carried, to men who did nothing whatever but sit still through 2 bad years, which is what the men who were on it would have done if I had let them. So I was wrong, and I was wrong quickly, and I had it in writing, and my father found out how I had it in writing, and that is the whole of it. And you have not signed anything since, said Marjorie. I have not signed anything since that I could help. She finished the tie and pulled it down and put her hand flat on the new thatch to feel it sit. You will have to sign for the sugar, she said. Garrow laughed once, in spite of himself, and went off down the bank with the barrow. The Duke of Corvedale stood where he was. You are not going to say anything about it, he said. What would I say? You know it better than I could tell you. She came down off the ledge and wiped her hands. There is nothing on this bank I can put right by being sorry at it either. I feed the light ones and I unite the queenless ones, and I do it in the right week. And if I do it in the wrong week, the sorrow does not weigh an ounce. That is all I know about anything. On the Friday she came down at 6, and the whole face of the bank had been dug back and reset, and the flags lay level from end to end, and there was fresh sand brushed into the joints, and every board sat flat and true. He was not there. He never once mentioned it, then or afterwards, and when she said thank you at the estate room that evening, he asked her whether the 4 light stocks had taken the feed. The book came out of the house on a wet Friday, in the last week of July, when there was nothing to be done outside, and Marjorie had been shut in the wax house since noon scraping old comb. My grandfather's bee-master kept this, said the Duke, and put it on the bench. Nobody has opened it since I was a boy. I thought it might be worth something to you. It was a quarto book in a limp cover, with the corners gone furry, and the hand in it was beautiful, and the spelling was nobody's business but its own. Right, said Marjorie. Now listen to this. To hinder bees from swarming, hang a piece of iron in the hive. Well, said the Duke. Well, what? It may hinder them. It will hinder nothing whatever. It will hinder the comb, which they will build round it, and then in the autumn there will be a piece of iron in your honey. You have not tried it. I have not tried standing on my head in the pond either, said Marjorie, and I am confident about the outcome. Here is another. A bee will not sting a maid. There was a small pause. That one I have heard, said the Duke. Everybody has heard it. Every bee-keeping man in England has told that one to some poor girl at a hive door and thought himself very fine. I was stung 11 times in one afternoon when I was 15 years old, and I have not forgotten one of them. It does not say how many times she may be stung. It says she will not be stung. It is a general principle. It is a lie in a good hand, said Marjorie. Which is the worst sort? Here, for a sting, the juice of an onion. That is not nonsense. My mother did that. It is not nonsense, and it is not much good either. What is good is to get the sting out with the back of a knife and not with your fingers, because your fingers squeeze the bag and put the rest of it in, and half the swelling anybody ever had off a bee was put there by themselves in the first 2 seconds. And here. She turned the page. When the master of the house dies, the bees must be told the same night, and the hives turned about as the coffin goes out of the door, or they will all be dead before the year is out. He did not say anything to that. Now that, said Marjorie, is the only piece of foolishness in this book that I have ever been sorry was foolishness. Why sorry? Because nobody told my father's bees, she said, and they were gone by the February, every stock, and I know precisely why. They were gone because they were sold in April to men who did not feed them, and half of them were smothered in the September for their honey, and that is arithmetic and not sorrow. But I would rather it had been the other thing. I would rather it had been because somebody forgot to go out into the dark and say a sentence. The rain went along the roof of the wax house. Do they know you? Said the Duke. No, you are on that bank 14 hours a day. They know the bank. They know the flowers, and they know the sun, and they know the smell of me, because I am always in it. And if I came down there tomorrow in another woman's apron, they would go for me, and it would serve me right. That is not knowing. Knowing is what your dog does. I have watched you go down that row, with your hands bare, and they go over you like weather. That is because I am slow, and I do not breathe on them. I say, they know you. You may say it, said Marjorie, and it will not be true, and we shall get nowhere, and I have another 2 hours of this comb. It is my bee-master's book, he said, and I shall read what I like out of it, and after that, all the rest of that summer, he quoted it at her. He quoted the iron in the hive at her when she was up a ladder. He told Garrow, gravely in front of her, that the book was against feeding in July. And once, when she came into the estate room with her wrist swelled up like a loaf, he looked at it, and looked at her, and said only, onions, and she had to go out into the passage before she laughed. Reuben came to her at the end of that week, and stood about for a while first. I did what I was bid, he said. I know you did. Old Mr. Winter's way, and then the agent's way after him. You take the 2 heaviest at Michaelmas and the 2 heaviest at the back end, and you dig your pit, and you put your brimstone rag in, and you set the skep over the top of it, and it is done in 10 minutes, and they never know. They know, said Marjorie. Aye, said Reuben. They know. He turned his hat round. 12 year I have done that, and I never liked a day of it, and I told myself it was a thing that had to be. Same as killing a pig. And then you come and say there is another road, and nobody ever showed me the other road. Nobody showed me either. My father showed me. Will you show me? On the third dry warm afternoon in August, said Marjorie, and not before, because it wants heat, and it wants them full and idle. And if you try it on a cold day, you will have a mess and 100 stings, and you will say it does not work. Come to me the last week of August, and I will show you and Effie and anybody else that wants it. And after that you will never dig another pit as long as you live. Reuben nodded and put his hat on and took it off again. They said in the kitchen you were after him, he said. I said it too. I am telling you because you will hear it anyway. I heard it in June, said Marjorie. Have some of that comb off the bench and put it in the tray for me, and we will call it square. That Tuesday she read Mr. Latimer his paper on the third bench, and there was a letter in among the rest in the small upright hand, and she looked at the seal a good long while. Then she put it in her apron pocket and said, "The paper then," and read him the paper. The storm came on the 19th of July, out of a still white afternoon, and it took the roof off the bank. Marjorie had gone up at 11 to shut the wax house, because the pressure had turned everything sullen, and by midnight the wind was coming across the park from the west, with nothing in front of it, and she heard the first post go with a crack like a gun. She went out in her shift with a coat over it, and her boots undone. Half the thatch was up and gone into the dark, and 3 of the posts were down across the flags, and the skeps were going over one by one all along the row, and the noise coming off that bank was not a noise she had ever heard in her life. The Duke of Corvedale came round the end of the wall with a lantern and no coat. "Garrow is at the far lodge," he shouted. "There is nobody nearer than the stables." "Then it is you," she shouted back. "Do exactly what I say, and do not slap at anything, whatever happens, and if you slap at one you will have 30. Hold that light low and behind me." They worked from midnight until it got grey. Every skep that was over had to be got upright onto its own board, and the board got back onto its flag, and each one weighed like a sack of meal, and had to be carried level and set down without a jar, and the rain came sideways down the length of the bank so that the flags ran like a gutter. Some of them were only tipped. Some had rolled, and the comb inside had come away from the crown and lay in the wet grass in slabs, with the bees crawling over it in the lantern light, and those combs had to be gathered by hand and carried into the wax house, every scrap, because a pound of honey left on that bank at first light would bring every bee in the parish, and they would fight until the whole yard was killed out. "Why are they not stinging?" he said at about 2. "They are stinging. You have 4 in your hand and you have not looked at it." He looked at it. "Leave them," said Marjorie. "Take them out in the morning. If you stop for them now, we shall lose the light ones. And the light ones are the ones I have fed all July, and I am not losing them to a bit of weather at this stage of the summer." At 3 they came to the 2 that were smashed past saving, and she showed him the driving, on her knees on the wet flags with the lantern between them. Because a stock with no house cannot be left until morning. She set the broken skep upside down in a pail so it stood, and set a good empty one mouth to mouth over the top of it, and made him hold the join tight. "Now do not move at all." And she drummed. She beat with the flats of both hands on the sides of the lower skep, low down first and then working up. A steady rolling beat, with no pause in it, and she kept it up while the rain went down the back of her neck, and after 4 or 5 minutes, the note inside the straw changed and rose, and then went thick and travelling, and something poured upward past his hands in the dark. That is them going up, she said, still drumming. They run away from the drumming, and they take her with them, and in a minute there will be nothing left down here but the comb and 6 fools. How will you know when she has gone up? By the sound. There she stopped, and lifted the top skep away, and there they hung in the lantern light in a solid brown cluster from the crown of it, quiet as a hung coat. There she is. She is in the middle of that, and she will not come out of it now for anything. He looked at it, with the rain running off his chin. That is 30 years my grandfather's men were killing them, he said, and it takes 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes, and it takes knowing when, said Marjorie. The when is the whole of it. Everything I know is when. At 4:30 they got the last board straight, and she put her hand out and stopped his wrist, because he had picked up the broken lantern by the hot part without noticing, and neither of them said anything about the hand or about the wrist, then or afterwards. The rain went off, the light came up grey over the walled garden, and the bank stood there in a ruin of thatch and mud with 19 skeps upright on their boards, and every single one of them alive. She sat down on the flags in the wet with her back against the wall because her legs had finished, and after a moment he sat down beside her, a duke in 3 inches of water, and they watched the first bees come out of the mouths and stand and look at the weather. Where are you this evening? And what is it doing outside your window? I hope it is nothing like that. Stay with them a while longer if you can, because the sun is coming up on those 2, and neither of them has said a word. The agent came down on the 14th of August and stood on the walk with a stick and told Marjorie Ockley that the peas would want the ground by the end of September. Then he had better tell me himself, she said, for he has not. He will tell you at my Michaelmas. He will tell me at my Michaelmas, she agreed, and until my Michaelmas this is a bee yard, and you are standing on my flight line, and if you stay there in that black coat with the sun behind you, they will take you for a bear, and you will find out something about yourself. He moved. 2 days after that she came out at 6 in the morning and saw the chalk on the limes. There were crosses on 60 of them, on the west side of the avenue, at shoulder height, a neat round shouldered cross on each trunk, and she stood in the wet grass and looked down the row and felt it go through her. 60 limes. In flower they were the whole of the yard's June. A bank of bees under a lime avenue is a bank that fills its own combs in a fortnight and never needs a hand put to it, and a bank of bees under 60 stumps is a bank that starves in a good year. She said nothing about it to anybody. She had no standing to say anything, and she knew what the timber was for, because Garrow had told her the roofs at the home farm had gone past mending, and there was no money, and there had been no money since the hill. On the Friday, at 7, she gave her account in the estate room and did not mention the limes. You are not saying something, said the Duke. I am saying the stocks are 23, because the 2 queenless ones took, and the 2 we drove in the storm have gone in with the light ones, and are doing better than the light ones ever did alone. That is what I came to say. You have not sat down. I do not sit down in here. Sit down. She sat down. The table between them was clean as a plate, as it always was, and there was a paper on it, the second paper she had ever seen on that table, and it was face down. I wrote to my father 4 times over the winter, said the Duke of Corverdale. Marjorie Ockley sat very still. November, December, February, March, 4. About the lodge roof, and about the hill ground letting again, because I would rather he heard that from me than in the town, and about the last one was not about anything. He turned his hand over. He never answered one of them. Not a line. Not by Garrow, not by the woman who does for him, nothing. So in the March I wrote that it was the 4th and that I would not write again, and I have not, and it is a great deal easier than it was. Why are you telling me? Because you sit with him for an hour every week and he has never once said my name to you, and I did not want you to think it was for want of asking. He got up and went to the window. That is all. I do not want anything said to him. If you carry a word of it down that walk, I shall know, and I shall mind it.
I will not carry a word of it, said Marjorie. Good. Is there anything else you want to say to me tonight?
No, said the Duke. Feed the light ones. She went out through the passage and across the yard and stood in the dark by the wax house door for a length of time she could not afterwards account for. On the Monday, when she came out, there was a man on a ladder in the avenue with a pail and a scrubbing brush, going lime by lime, washing the chalk off. And on the Wednesday, when she came down to the bank at first light, there were the stands. Somebody had made them out of good oak in the carpenter's shop, 23 of them, one to every flag. A little low stand for each skep with a lip round the top so a board would sit in it and not travel. She saw them, and thought only that they were well made. Then she went to lift the first skep across onto its stand, and found she did not have to bend, and did not have to lift, and could take the weight of it against her body without stooping at all, because the top of every stand stood exactly at the height of her own forearm. She stood on the bank with a skep in her arms and her heart going like a hammer, because there is only one way to know a thing like that, and it is to watch a woman work for 8 weeks and never say a word about it. Nobody had asked her. She had never told a soul that her arms were done by the end of the row, or that she carried each skep against her chest rather than set it down for a moment on the grass, because a skep set down on the grass is a skep with the mouth blocked, and she would not risk it, not once, not with her arms shaking. She set it into the stand, and it went in as though it had been measured, which it had. The stillness came down on the park at the end of August, like a hand laid flat, 3 days of it, with the limes gone over, and the flowers all done, and a white haze standing over the ground from 8 in the morning. Marjorie walked out to the top of the bank on the second of those evenings, when the yard had gone quiet, and sat on the end of the wall with her arms round her knees, and made herself do the sum. She had known for some while. There was no dignity in going on pretending she had not, and she had never had much use for the kind of woman who has to be told twice by her own chest. So she looked at it, plainly, the way she would look at a stock she suspected. He had levelled the flags. He had scrubbed 60 limes and taken the roofs off the home farm's chances for another year to do it. He had sat in the wet at 4:30 in the morning. He had had oak stands made to her arm, and had watched her long enough to know what her arm was. And none of it was for her, and she knew exactly what it was for, and she made herself say it out. It was 6 years since he had put his name to a piece of paper that ended 22 households in a month, and he had been wrong, and he had had the wrongness proved to him slowly, in rent rolls, by ground that came round on its own the moment it was let alone. A man does not get over that. A man like that stops being able to end anything at all. He will not sign a lease, and he will not sign a warrant, and he will not put his name to the grubbing of a bee bank that has not paid in 10 years. because the last time he decided a thing was finished, he was wrong about it, and somebody died in the town of being wrong about. And here she had come in at the gate in June, a plain woman of 24 with nothing behind her, out of a room over a staymaker's, 8 weeks off the road, one more failing thing on his ground. He was not choosing her. He was refusing to put her down. That was the whole of it, and it fitted every single fact she had, which is how a person knows they have got it right. Every kindness she could name was a kindness he would have done to anything that was in danger of ending in his sight. The limes were not for her. The limes were the 22 families, paid back a shilling at a time to whoever was in front of him. The stands were the same. He would have had stands made for Reuben. She sat on the wall until it was properly dark. And there was the other side of it, which was worse, and she made herself look at that too. A man doing penance is not free. Whatever he gave her would be taken from what he owed somebody else, and she would be standing there, taking it, knowing what it was, and every year of her life she would be watching him and wondering, and she had watched enough hives to know that a thing built on the wrong foundation does not come apart in the first season, but it comes apart. She said, out loud to the dark and the wall and nobody, well, that is that. Then she got up and went in and mixed the feed for the light ones, because the light ones did not care. At the town gate on the Friday, 2 women came in for the walk, and one of them said, not quietly, that the bee woman had got in at the old gentleman first and worked up from there, and that some of them knew their business. Marjorie went past with the barrow and said good morning to both of them. And on the Saturday it was fixed. The taking would be the last Wednesday in August in the afternoon, and the whole house was to come down and see it, because the Duke had said so, and because Reuben had told the kitchen, and the kitchen had told everybody. Garrow was to bring Mr. Latimer down from the lodge in the garden chair. He had not been inside the park wall on that side in 6 years, and he had said yes in one word. That night Marjorie Ockley took the tin out from under the bed in the room over the wax house and set it on the sill and took the lid off and counted what was in it, which she did not need to do. There were 5. The last Wednesday in August came in hot and still, and by 3 o'clock there were 19 people standing on the grass below the bank. Effie was there with her sleeves down and her arms crossed. Reuben was there with a pail and a clean skep and a wisp of straw. The kitchen was there, and 2 of the stable men, and the woman who did for Mr. Latimer at the lodge, and Garrow stood behind the garden chair at the end of the row, with his hands on the back of it, and in the chair sat the old man with his face turned up into the warm, and his hands one on the other on the head of his stick. The Duke of Corvedale stood at the back of them all, and did not come forward. Now, said Marjorie, from the flags, you have all been told this is a killing day, because it always has been on this bank, and there is a pit dug at the end there that Reuben dug in July before he knew any better. Nothing is going into it. Come up closer. You cannot see from there, and there is nothing to be frightened of. Effie, come to the front. They came up. This is the heaviest stock on this bank, she said, with her hand on the crown of it. 60 pounds of straw and comb and honey and bees, and the old way is to put it over a rag of brimstone and have the honey by supper and every bee in it dead. I want you to watch what we do instead. because Reuben is going to do it next time, and I want witnesses that he was shown properly." She gave 2 puffs of smoke at the mouth from a smoldering rag on a stick and waited. "That is all the smoke there is in this. It makes them fill themselves, and a bee with a full stomach is a bee with a good opinion of the world. Reuben, the pail." She lifted the skep off its board, off its stand, at the height of her forearm, and turned it over and set it mouth up in the pail so it stood steady, and the whole crowd made a sound. Then she took the clean, empty skep and set it mouth to mouth on top, and told Reuben to hold the join. Now I drum, hands flat, low down on the sides, and I go up as I go on, and I do not stop and I do not hurry, and it will take 10 minutes, and it will be very dull for you all. It was very dull for them all. She beat on the straw with both hands, a rolling, steady beat, and went on beating, and the sun came off the wall, and somebody's child was taken away to the end of the row. And after 7 or 8 minutes the note inside the straw changed, and rose and thickened, and went travelling upward. "There she goes," said Marjorie, still beating. "Reuben, do you hear that?" "I hear it. That is her going up." 10 seconds more. She stopped, and lifted the top skep away, and turned it and held it up above her head, for all of them to see. And there they hung off the crown of it, in one great quiet cluster, 30 or 40,000 of them, and the sun came through the edges of it. Nobody said anything at all. They will go in tonight with the light stock on the end flag, both of them sprinkled out of the same can so they smell alike, and by Friday it will be one stock, and it will be the heaviest thing on this bank going into the winter," said Marjorie. "And that is the honey there in the pail, every comb of it, and the combs with the young in them go straight across to the weak one, because the brood is the next generation, and only a fool boils the next generation for 1 shilling a pound." Then Reuben began to clap, and then the kitchen did, and then all of them. And Effie was crying and pretending she was not, and Garrow was saying something to Mr. Latimer, close down by his ear, telling him what was in the air over their heads. Marjorie Ockley set the skep down in its stand. "There is another thing," she said, "and it wants saying now, while you are all here, and I would be obliged if nobody speaks until I have got to the end of it." It went quiet. "Mr. Latimer, last October you took me on to read to you, and I gave you my terms and you agreed to them. I said I would read you what was there. I said I would not put anything in and I would not leave anything out. And that if there was a thing you would rather not hear, you must tell me before I began, and you never told me any such thing, not once in 11 months. The old man's hands came off the head of the stick. In November there was a letter in your post with the Corvedale seal on it. I knew whose hand it was. I had seen what your son's name did to you the week before, and I thought I was sparing you, and I put it in my pocket, and I told you there was nothing else. That was a lie, and I knew it when I said it. Somebody in the crowd drew breath, and somebody else hushed them. I did it again in December, and in February, and in March, and I did it again 3 weeks ago, and by then I was not sparing anybody. I was keeping my hour on that bench, because it was the only warm hour I had in the week, and I did not want to be the woman who spoiled it. There are 5 letters. They are in a tin in my room, and I have carried them every day since June, and nobody would ever have found out. She put her hand into her apron and brought out the tin. Your son wrote to you 5 times and had no answer, and he stopped, and he thinks you refused him. That was me, not him and not you. Me, the bees went over the top of them all in the sun. You told me the first day, said Mr. Latimer. I know. You said you would not leave anything out. I know I did, said Marjorie Ockley. The old man put out his hand into the air, and she came down off the flags and put the tin into it, and he held it on his knees and could not open it, and after a moment Garrow reached round and got the lid off for him. Read them, said Mr. Latimer. Sir, you will read them, he said. Here now, all 5. It is the 11th month, and you are still my reader, and I am still paying you a shilling, and I have not yet had my hour today. So Marjorie Ockley stood on the grass at the foot of the bee bank in front of 19 people and read them out, one after another, in the plain voice she used for the shipping and the assizes. They were short. The first was about the lodge roof and the frost. The second said that the hill ground had let again at a better rent, and that it was not written to be told he had been wrong, but that the old man would hear it in the town, and it had better come from him. The third had 2 lines in it about going up the hill and finding the ash trees still standing over where the top house had been. The fourth said that this was the 4th, and that there would not be another, and that if ever he was sent for he would come the same day. The 5th was 3 lines, and it said that the roof had been done after all, and that he hoped it would carry the winter. When she had finished, Effie said, quite loudly, that was a wicked thing to do, and then put her hand over her mouth. It was, said Marjorie, and you never had to say a word of it. No, then I do not know what to think of you, said Effie, and I liked you very much this morning. You may think what you like of me, said Marjorie. You are not wrong. Reuben said nothing at all. Garrow looked over the top of them all at the back of the crowd, where the Duke of Corvedale was standing exactly where he had been standing since 3 o'clock, with his hat in his hand, and had not moved. And Mr. Latimer sat in the chair with 5 letters loose on his knees, and put his hand flat down on them, so the air should not have them. Read me the 4th one again, he said. She read it again. Now take me up to the house, said the old man. The wax house at 11 o'clock at night smelt of hot water and old comb, and Marjorie Ockley had got everything she owned into the box in about a quarter of an hour, which is one of the few advantages of owning nothing. Effie came in with a candle in a saucer and put it on the bench and stood there. You are going. First light. I shall be in the town by 7, and there is a woman there who wants a plain sewer, and I have got my wages to my Michaelmas, and I am better off than I was in June by a good deal. They are all up at the house, said Effie. The old gentleman is in the long room, and he has had his supper in there, and Garrow says he is stopping the night. 6 years. That is good. They are saying downstairs that you are the reason of it. I am the reason there were 6 years, said Marjorie. Effie sat down on the corner of the bench. Show me how to do the feed, she said. For the light ones. If you are going in the morning, somebody has got to. So Marjorie showed her, at 11 o'clock at night, by 1 candle, the sugar and the small beer, and the water off the boil, and the wisp of clean straw floating on the top of the tin so that they should have something to stand on and not drown in it, and how to slide it in under the rim at dusk and not at noon, because at noon the smell of it goes down the bank and the strong ones come and rob the weak ones of the very thing that was meant to save them. I do not understand you, said Effie. You could have burnt them. I know. Nobody would ever have known. I would have known, said Marjorie.
She wiped the tin round and set it down. Listen, there is a thing about a stock in February. You lift the back of it, and it is light, and there is no sound in it, and the board underneath is dirty, and every bit of sense you have says it is dead, and you can be standing over it with the pit dug. And it is not dead. It is only sitting still in the middle in a ball, waiting out a bad year, and if you give it the season it comes out in April, and it is the best stock on the bank. She put the lid on the pan. There is no way to tell one from the other. There is not. You feed it and you wait, and you are wrong in one direction or the other, and the only thing you get to choose is which way you are wrong. I have been wrong the other way in my time. I have not been wrong the other way since April, and I do not intend to start again at the age of 24 to save myself a bad morning. Effie took the candle and went to the door. I shall not say goodbye to you, she said. It would be too much like agreeing with it. That is fair, said Marjorie Ockley, and she sat down on the box in the dark and did not sleep. At 6 in the morning the town gate stood open for the Tuesday walk, and there were 9 or 10 people coming in under the ironwork, and Garrow was there with the garden chair, and Mr. Latimer was in it, and the household had come down the avenue for reasons nobody was admitting to. Marjorie came out of the gate with her box against her hip. The Duke of Corverdale came down the avenue at a pace that was not a walk, and stopped in front of her on the gravel with all of them looking, and it was some time before anything came out at all. I stood at the end of that walk in June for an hour, he said. I came down to see who had got hold of my father. That is what I came for. That is the sort of thing I have been for 6 years. He stopped. He started somewhere else. I have been at it all night, trying to make what you did into something I could hold against you. It would have been easier. It is not there. I cannot find it, and I have looked properly. He put out his hand and took it back. I do not care about the letters. That is not true. I mind them very much, and I shall mind them for a long time, and I am telling you so, in front of all these people, because you told them everything in front of all these people, and I am not going to be less honest than you at my own gate. Somebody in the crowd shifted, and Garrow said very quietly, "Stand still." "Do not go," said the Duke of Corverdale. "Not at Michaelmas. Not at all. I am asking. That is all it is only asking. I have not got anything else to do it with." And then he went down on the wet gravel in front of the town, on both knees, badly, like a man who has not thought it through, and stayed there. "Get up," said Marjorie. "No, you will have those breeches to answer for." "Yes," he said. "Will you stay?" She put the box down on the gravel. "Yes," she said. The bank carried 31 stocks into the following winter, and 30 of them came out in the April, which nobody on that ground had seen in living memory, and the wax went to the churches again by the Michaelmas after that. Reuben did the driving himself the second year, with Effie holding the join, and would let nobody else near it, and was insufferable about it for a fortnight. Mr. Latimer never went back to the lodge. He had the garden room which has the long window, and he was brought down to the 3rd bench of the lime walk on Tuesdays and Fridays for as long as he was able, and after that the walk was brought to him in the form of Garrow, who described it to him at unbearable length and got half of it wrong on purpose. The hill ground was let on lives, on terms no agent would have advised, and 2 of the names on the leases were the grandsons of men who had been carried off it, and there is a great deal that cannot be put right, and that was not any part of it. And everybody concerned knew as much. And on a Tuesday in the June after, in the flower, with the whole avenue going over their heads like a held note, the Duke of Corvidal sat on the third bench of the lime walk and read the newspaper aloud to his father, and read it badly, and lost his place twice in the shipping. "You have left something out," said the old man. "I have not. You have. There was a column and a half of the Assizes, and you have given me 9 lines of it. There is nothing in the Assizes." "That is not the arrangement," said Mr. Latimer. "The arrangement in this family is that nothing is put in and nothing is left out." "Marjorie, is he leaving it out?" "He is," said Marjorie Ockley, from the end of the bench, with her hands in her lap and a sting coming up on the back of one of them. "He has been leaving it out since the top of the page." "There," said the old man, and put his face up into the warm. "Go back and read it all." So he went back and read it all, and the bees went over, and there is a stock on the end flag of that bank that came through 3 bad years, and is the heaviest thing on the ground. Is there something in your own keeping that you have written off, that might only be sitting quiet in the middle, waiting out a bad year? Give it the season, if you can spare one. And come back and sit with us again, on the third bench, whenever you have an hour.